which I just did. And I thank you, first off. We haven't even started the thing yet, but I thank you. I know you and the other candidates are extremely busy. And so I have my little notes here. Some come from me, some come from your constituents. I was going to say ours, but that's not the case, just my neighbors. But let's start with, you have been, I honestly, I know you have been in office for a while, but other than that, and that you're vice mayor now. So other than that, I really don't know anything. So why don't you introduce yourself, which I should have asked in the first place, and then tell us about your life, public and or private.
Okay. Well, I think it's and again, thank you so much for letting me be here. I really appreciate it. I know I'm not the only one that's busy. I know you are too. So um, I think it's important. My name's Joel Bryant. I've lived here in Brentwood since 2001 with my family. Um, I know a lot of people really only see me working on council a lot of times. Most, that will be seeing this. So I'll give you a little bit of background on who I am as a person. I am uh, the first of my family to live in the state of California. I come from a biracial family. My father was Cherokee, and my mother is white. Well, was white. She was Jewish, and her father was Nansemond Indian and English. And so that's kind of the background of the house I grew up in, the home I grew up in. I was raised on a ranch in Oklahoma for much of my life. My dad was also a home builder. He wasn't a developer, but he built homes, and so I come from a very blue collar background. Um, my father, when I was 10 years old, we moved from Oklahoma to South Carolina, and it was in the 70s, and that was significantly different than my life in Oklahoma on the ranch. In Oklahoma, up until that point in our family, because my family is who they were and what they were, uh, the race discussion to a 10-year-old just didn't happen around our home because I didn't know anyone that it mattered what your race was. It just didn't matter. We were all a mix of something, but we were all neighbors. And so when I moved into the South, um, I had some experiences that really helped form who I am as a person. And that is, I know I look white, and I didn't know that made a difference. My father is not white, was not white. You can go onto my Facebook page. I have pictures of him and my family and his side of the family. But I didn't know that made any difference until we moved into the South. And we moved there. My father was working for a company called Duke Power at that time. It was before what was called the 3 Mile Island incident. So the nuclear power facilities were all shut down at that point for a while in the country. And he was building nuclear power facilities for Duke Power. And so he would leave early in the morning and come home late in the evening. And so the first several months that we lived there, it was just my father and I, while my mother let the other kids get done with school and move down. And it was a time where the local neighborhoods, we lived closer than any time before to other people. And so I made friends with the local kids. And then I remember specifically one day when, it's amazing what moments in time really burn into your mind. And I was playing with 5 or 6 of the local young guys, and we all wanted to go into our house to get a baseball bat or a glove or something. And we ran in through the back door, through the kitchen, and into the family room. And my father was sitting in his recliner reading the newspaper. And I kept going toward my room, and I realized that everybody had stopped in the kitchen. And I turned around and motioned them to follow me, and they quietly walked. Now, my father was a very big man. He was intimidating size-wise to little kids, and so I didn't think a lot of it. And then they whispered, who is that? And so, well, it's my dad. And we went out and played. And then the next day, I was made aware that I couldn't go over to their houses to play, and they couldn't come to mine. And I thought they were joking. And what happened was, and this is an actual conversation from the mid 70s in South Carolina. They were told that their parents were afraid that my dad would scalp them if they would come to my house. And so I became the kid that wasn't. Now I know that there are a lot of people that live in California, certainly of my age and older, that understand a world that we don't live in now to a significant degree. There's still a long, long way to go before we have true equilateral justice in the world and in our country. But I was raised in an area where, and I don't want this to sound like I was a martyr, because I was just one of my family members. What I went through is absolutely nothing compared to some of what my family members and my friends have gone through.
Mhm.
But I was in the other category. And in the South, during that time period, there was either you were a white family or you were other. And if you were other, that was it. It didn't matter what mix or anything.
Right.
Um, so I was in the other category. I started going to school, and I found out very quickly that if you're in the other category, you become a target. At that time, I was one of the younger kids on the bus. I learned very quickly to sit on the very first seat in the bus. It had a little two-person seat instead of the three-person. And as soon as the bus started rolling up to the stop, I still remember the address, Route 5, Box 656. We were still in the country, but there were people around.
Mhm.
I would grab a hold of the pole, and I would swing myself out the door, and I'd launch off the bottom step, because if I didn't get at least 50 yards head start on the kids on the bus, they were going to catch me, and they were going to beat me up and stomp me and kick me and spit on me. And they would have somebody sit on me or stand on me and do the little dancing around and stuff. And I just figured it was because they were mean kids, because these are things that I had never experienced before at all. And so my father is one of my heroes, just as a person, because he refused to allow any of his kids to be controlled by how others made them feel. And we did not have a television in our home. He said it rotted your brain, but we did have lots of music. I come from a very musical family. I have been a professional musician for many years. I know that you have been in the music industry as well. And that's a whole different world that has changed. But
Yes. Excuse me.
but that what my father did was he was very much a believer in the power of the individual, and the significance that an individual can make. And he drilled that into us by several ways. And first of all, we had many sets of encyclopedias. And one of the sets of encyclopedias, and I've looked for it for the rest of my life, I haven't found it yet, was about significant people in the history of the world. And then there was one specific set, 3 or 4 volumes of it, was significant people in the United States of America. And I didn't realize at the time the significance of what the wording was. It wasn't significant men, it was significant people.
Mhm.
And it had a long list of everyone. And my heroes growing up were individuals that became significant not because of who they were born into, but because of the things they did in spite of the opposition. People that were the heroes that I was raised with were Dr. George Washington Carver, Frederick Douglass. What I didn't realize at the time, being a 10-year-old in the 70s, was some of the others. Most of the world is familiar with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and what he represented, stood for, and what he went through, but they don't know who Medgar Evers is. They don't know who some of the other leaders were. They're not sure who some of the people that ran the Underground Railroad was. And a lot of our family history was about the things that our own family went through. My fourth great grandmother, her name is Amanda Green. She was, I have her emancipation papers. She
Wow.
married into the family. She married into the Cherokee Nation, and she's on what they call the freedmen list. Which meant that she had been an enslaved person. Her family had been. When she was 16 years old, the Emancipation Proclamation was made, and a lot of the people of color from all over the South began to move out of the South for better opportunities.
Right.
And so that's who my family is. That's who I am as a person. Again, I am a musician. I play the bass, upright and electric. I've had opportunity to live in a lot of different states in the country. I've traveled all over the world with music and learned a lot of things. I've had an opportunity to stay in people's homes that lived in grass huts and had dirt floors,
Mhm.
no electricity, no running water. So, that's a little bit of what was the motivation when we moved to California. We moved into Los Angeles in 1997, and it was kind of a mixed reason. I worked for a small uh, church there, as well as a homeless mission. We worked a lot with the homeless, and for 5 years, nearly 4 years, that's what I did. I worked with the people in Long Beach, homeless predominantly, and then moved up to Brentwood and have been pastoring the congregation here. That congregation has been here since the 40s, 1943. And so, we lived here, and I've been a chaplain with the police department for 15 years. And so I've had the opportunity to, be at people's homes and with people at the worst day of their lives, most of them. There's usually a really bad thing that happened for me to be there.
Right.
And I just, I love Brentwood. I love the community of Brentwood. I love the fact that even though we've grown to what we are, it still very much feels like a small town, down home type community. And it continues to become more and more diversified. And the overall populace of California has an understanding has an enlightenment that a lot of other states don't have, as far as just how you treat people and how you're supposed to treat people. And so I really love that. I love living here. I love being a part of the community.
Well, as someone who was born and raised here, I can't argue. And when you were talking about your history, and we'll talk about it offline because this is about you, not about me. But a couple of things. One, you want to talk about surprises. I was born 1959, San Francisco. On my birth certificate, I'm considered white. So for those who are looking at me, surprise. I'm German, Portuguese, and Black. I only say that because I understand your look the whole judging book by cover type of thing. But that's something we could talk about later. When you were talking about getting kicked and stomped, I figure, okay, well that's perfect for you as vice mayor and running for mayor. You're used to getting kicked and stomped, so that actually doesn't sound bad. It, let's get into um, let's get into the small town feel. I have several things, and I appreciate your time. I'll start in no particular order, and that is um, the second biggest thing that bothers me, Danny Dorman, is the whole notion of defunding the police. Now, I am not a fan of defunding the police. All right. I am a fan of treating the police like you treat any other job. All right. And the argument's been made before about, their the risks involved, and you never know if you're going to come home that night and all that. I understand and I applaud. But the two examples I give is firefighters. They don't know if they're coming home. All right. No one really loves them till they need them. But we don't have that same different level of tolerance when it comes to firefighters not doing their job properly. Same thing with teachers. They are the root of our community. They help our community grow, thrive through our children. And we certainly don't tolerate teachers at the same degree as we do police. Now, I'm only focusing on Brentwood. I know this is way outside the boundaries of Brentwood, but I'm only talking about Brentwood because the chief reports to the mayor or the council. I'm still learning all this stuff.
The chief reports to the city manager.
City manager. Oh, okay. See, I'm learning something new. And I'm sure that the chief believes and truly tries to do what he says he wants to do. I believe him with that. I'm going to get to the point in a second. But if you look at the police as a job, and you can look at any job, you said you've been around, you've lived elsewhere, you've you practice your ministry, but in any job, you know those who excel and you know those who are deadwood. And the manager usually knows who excels and who's deadwood. And here's where the disconnect in my head is. In any other job, that won't be tolerated. Yet it is tolerated here. It's tolerated everywhere, but again, I'm focusing only on Brentwood. So, what are your thoughts on what really needs to be done with respect to how our officers are treated?
That is it's an extremely fair question. And one of the things that it's important, I think, for, well, most people that are going to be watching this or that live here understand that when you join a job of any kind,
Mhm.
you walk into a situation and you inherit some things that you don't like and that you want to change. I will say that in my personal opinion, and everyone knows this, certainly all the officers know this, there is a zero, and I don't mean 0 point something, I mean there is a zero tolerance for anything less than striving for perfect equilateral treatment and behavior and expectations. There are some jobs, and you mentioned that there are some jobs that don't have the risk involved, but there are no jobs that have less of a buffer for malfeasance, for bad action, for someone that has a wrong way of thinking. Now, people are really good at interviewing. I mean, there are some people that have got the interview process down. And the police department at Brentwood has one of the most stringent hiring and and mental evaluation processes that there are. And still, there are people that have been able to manipulate the process, and that's why there is such a long training period here in Brentwood. Just because you look good on paper doesn't mean you're going to stay working here in Brentwood. Now, any kind of agency, and I've worked at a few police agencies, and I've worked with in that process first responders of all kinds, fire, paramedics. In any agency, it's going to take generations sometimes to. I've noticed this in everything, but certainly in law enforcement and in any kind of group of people that have uh, overarching authority powers. In government, you have this. In police, you have this. We're talking about police right now, but you have the DNA of the mindset of the people that established that kind of job that has worked all the way up through the ranks for years. And then you have every consecutive generation, you have people that have, certainly in this country and certainly in California, you've got people that weren't raised in an environment that it so much mattered um, who you were or who you weren't, but that very genuinely, many of the families here that I've met in California that were raised here, it's the content of the character versus anything else that truly does matter.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain jobs that if you have personal viewpoints that are to most of the rest of us, if we were to know what that person really thought, we would consider them vile, unethical, unacceptable thoughts or behaviors. But if you're able to have those, there are jobs that you can have those in, and it's not as obvious, and there's a buffer area where even if you tell an off-color joke, most people, they'll just not want to hang around you, but it's not going to really damage people you're working with physically.
Right.
The police departments are not that way. There is, and it may not be fair when you compare them to all other categories, but a police officer has a zero area buffer, just like a heart surgeon would have a zero area buffer. I don't want a pretty good heart surgeon. I want a heart surgeon that doesn't make any mistakes. Now, that doesn't exist, but I want as close to that as possible. And I want that in our police officers also. As close as possible, I want there to be no mistakes. Now, being human, we're prone to error, and everybody can have a bad day or a bad week. One of the things I've observed that I think it would help getting everyone to where we will want to be as a society and help the police officers and our community understand is that part of the job of a police officer is they're never going around uh, on a beat or on a day where there's not just a calm average day. And there have been times that I've been working, riding along as the chaplain, where there was a baby that drowned, a 2-year-old baby that drowned. And that officer left that call and went to a family that was having a domestic quarrel and a domestic dispute. And they left that call, and we went and we helped to resuscitate an elderly woman and provide CPR until the ambulance could show up and the fire could show up. And then we left that, and there was a kid that across the street. Now, this is not just generally, this is a day actual call back to back. And it's not all this intense, but there are days where these officers are going through this. And then we went, and a neighbor was complaining that his next door neighbor's kid kept raising the flag on his mailbox. So we went from one extreme to something that is an annoyance to a neighbor. But in Brentwood, they focus on something called community policing, which is we are truly trying to provide as a city a service that is a across the board service.
Okay. And
Under those, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, 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 no. Anytime I hear a pregnant pause, I figure that's my time to jump in. So no, please finish. Please finish.
Well, I believe in order to get to where we absolutely must, that perfection is the bar. There is no we're doing really well or we're doing much better, because there's a family, there's a person that if a police officer isn't perfect, they're going to potentially, well, they will definitely have an impact on who that person becomes or who that person is for the rest of their life. They can either impact them for the positive or they will impact them in a negative way. And each one of those impacts is like a pebble in a pond. Every action has a ripple effect in everything you do in somebody's life. And there's no question, I've worked in departments where there were individuals that were police officers that had no business being police officers, none whatsoever. And I've worked in this department where over the years, I've seen that the culture in this department has constantly improved. Now, I didn't start the department. I came in, fairly recently, because I've only been here for 15 years. But at the same time, every consecutive chief and every consecutive group of directors and leaders and captains and lieutenants have made strides to become more and more without flaw. That hasn't happened yet, but our current chief, I know that there's a process historically, and anybody can look at history and see that the process of fixing a problem is, first of all, you must acknowledge that there's a problem. And for centuries, at least almost 2 centuries here now in this country, there has been a significant portion of the mindset and the psyche in this country that there is no problem. But having lived on the side where it was a problem to just walk down the street as a kid in a certain time in my life, there are problems. And again, my life has been really good and blessed compared to a lot of my family members and friends that look nothing like me. And so it is unacceptable whatsoever in my mind at any time that who a person is or isn't has any bearing on how they are treated by a police officer or a police department, period. There's no room for it at all.
And you will not hear me disagree. And we could talk about this offline because this will go on forever. But I've been here 17 years, since 2003. I had 2 kids grow up here, and I've had a lot of their friends grow up here. And so my view may be a little bit different than yours and those watching. So, but like I said, it's not about me, it's about you. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Now, as a matter of fact, I even put notes down, so I can't find the notes, so I'll just have to do it on the fly. All right. People can donate whatever they want. Okay. You can donate $10 because you believe in the cause. Me, if I were to donate $500, I would hope, hey, remember me when you're in office. And the more it becomes, one could argue, the more expectations are expected. And again, my question has nothing to do with a particular person, particular entity, particular dollar amount. It does have to do with the amount of money raised for the position. Now, what I didn't know until I started doing this thing, the mayor makes, I don't know, like 14 grand a year. I can't even say that's prevailing wage. So yeah, understand that most of you, if not all of you, are doing it because you care about the city. You certainly aren't trying to retire off the salary. Uh, but it doesn't seem to jive when people donate large sums of money. Uh, and again, I'm not pointing anything. Yeah, Kate, you read Facebook, you read next door. I probably have people that will chirp in my ear and say, well, Danny, how come you didn't ask that? So, Danny, how come you didn't ask that? Because I'm not trying to get in the mudslinging. I want to get to know you. So you, when you become mayor, because as I always say, I got to be right with one of you. When you become mayor, what or would take any interrogative would you do to mitigate that appearance of impropriety?
Well, I will tell you that clearly, um, there's no question and there's no arguing that uh, a lot of people, most people probably, would anticipate that the more a person gives, there's no doubt that on the other side, there's probably more expectation. Uh, that's just human, that's just normal. But one of the things that I didn't know until I was on council and talking to other communities, because it was one of the things that was curious to me, because Brentwood currently has no limit to what a person could donate to anyone running. And and I went into the conversations with people, and I was wondering, why is that? What's is there a benefit, is there not a benefit? And without exception, in the communities and the cities, or special districts that have a limit to what people are able to donate, the tremendous advantage in that situation is for the person who is already sitting in that seat. The people that are live, say for example, if you're limited to $5,000 or $10,000 max donation, the people that are incumbents have an overwhelming advantage for the people that don't, if everyone can only raise a limited specific amount. And I'm very much against that idea of an incumbent having an overwhelming advantage, because I've lived in places that that was the case in the South. And and I'm going to age myself here, but there was an old movie series that had, or television series that had a character in it called Boss Hog.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
if you haven't been raised in the country, you may not understand that a boss hog is a real thing. It's a real pit. It's a real animal,
right.
and that's the one that lays down at the low end of the feeding trough, and whatever scraps are left over is what everybody else gets. And so I've lived in communities that the mayor was the mayor and the council was the council for life. They never had anybody that could raise enough money, because it was limited to what you could raise financially. They never had anybody that they could mount a real challenge, because they owned that seat. And I am absolutely averse and completely, with all my heart, disagree with the fact that the governmental representation that those seats are, and they are representative, not one single person owns that. Every one of us that sat there, that seat is a representative seat, and it belongs to the people. And and I have, again, my family, and I know I have bias this way, because my family, I literally had family members that died on the Trail of Tears. I don't know if a lot of people know what that is, but my second great grandfather died on the Trail of Tears, being marched from Georgia to Oklahoma in the winter. And they call it Salagi in the Cherokee language. It's the Trail of Tears, and we celebrate it every year as a remembrance. But that kind of governmental overreach and empowerment seems to be uh, contrary to what would make sense. But the reality is, if you don't allow people that aren't already an incumbent, don't already have the advantage of a track record that businesses can look at and people can look at and say, this is how this person looks at business. I feel comfortable that I'm going to get a fair hearing at least because this is how they've operated. That's just having the experience of being on a council or board or commission is an advantage because you've had to learn the laws, you've had to learn the rules, and you had to learn how things work as as a business of the city or as a business of a library board or whatever it is. And so you have an advantage knowledge wise. I don't think you should have an advantage financially so that nobody else could ever get that seat. So though it seems counterintuitive to want to cap that, and if you will ask around other communities that the amount that you can raise is capped, you will find that it is a tremendous disadvantage to the people who are not incumbents. And when I learned that, it seems counterintuitive. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be held accountable for every penny you raise. Fortunately, the campaign accounts, for people that aren't aware, you have to prove, and you have to prove it significantly and legally, that you did not receive one single personal benefit from 1 cent financially. Not one penny can personally benefit me as a person, as my family.
Mhm.
Every dime is accounted for, and if it's not spent on mailers and campaigns and flyers and signs, then it can be spent in a very limited way that whoever, me or anybody else, cannot have any benefit, not measurable benefit, any benefit of that whatsoever, other than for the campaign or being able to help special districts, special functions in the community. And so how I feel is, yes, I'm for people being able to raise money. And the more money a person donates to me, the more I have to take steps to make sure that there is not the appearance, when it comes to deciding anything dealing with them, I have to take steps to make it very clear that not only did that not buy benefit in my decision, but that I don't go overly biased against that, because I don't want it to appear, but I also don't want it to be in fact that I'm influenced either way with that. Fortunately, and again, I've had many opportunities in thousands and thousands of public decisions that are public record. There's never been one instance that I have been accused of making any benefit because somebody donated or didn't donate to me. There have been several instances while I've been on council that I specifically voted against a developer or someone who donated to my account, my campaign account, that I took a hard stand against what they were saying. And twice I was the swing vote that kept what it was they were pushing from happening. I've had people threaten me, call me and threaten me. I've had people show up and threaten me. I've had people in one decision when it came to our garbage and recycle transfer station, the individual that had donated to me had a business that also did that. And I went and met with him, and the numbers that he was offering to do that for were millions of dollars away from what the city of Brentwood could do it for. Do the same job or better ourselves.
Right.
And so in that specific process, and anybody can go back and watch the actual council meeting if they wanted to, in that process, what was right for Brentwood, which is for us to take control locally of those costs and those abilities. And it saved us all millions of dollars over the year as a community because we've done that ourselves. 3 of the council persons had already made it very clear that they were in support of Brentwood doing it ourselves. that left me with the ability, if I wanted to play money politics, to vote against it, still get what I thought was right happen, because the 3 votes were clearly already there. I could have made the donator very, like, okay, he's my guy, he's going to take my side. But I didn't. I voted as the 4th vote for it, while he had a room full of guys sitting there glaring at me, making threatening motions with me, staring me down. And I knew that I was going to be at the top of his most hated list, but it wasn't right for Brentwood. And so I voted that way. And there's time after time where I know that you can look at. I don't expect people to take the time to do that. I don't know that I would take the time to do it if it wasn't personally dealing with me. But I also know that in all the years I've been on council, there's not been one moment at all that whether somebody donated to my account or not, my campaign mattered at all to me. If it isn't right for Brentwood, there's my kids live here. I want my family to live here. I've got friends that live here. I have to answer to them. I have to be able to look them in the eye and tell without batting an eye, and mean it with all my heart, with the information I had at the time, and with everything that was involved in that decision. I firmly believe I made the very best decision for the benefit of the future of Brentwood, for my kids, for your kids, for our grandkids if we have them. And that's the decision-making process I make. I completely understand that people would throw the allegations and say the things that they have. I understand that. And if I had to do it over again, would I do it differently? Well, clearly I probably would have done it differently. Again, like I expressed to when they asked me about it at the newspaper, my campaign manager, part of his job is, after we've sent out the financial donation request, his job is to go back and get those checks. I don't know that what's come in until he brings me the checks and says, here, it's time to deposit these. And so when I was on the interview with the Chamber of Commerce and the newspaper, I absolutely did not have any idea what had come in or who had sent it in up until that point. Am I surprised that Sierra Pacific donated to my account? No, I'm not surprised. They have in the past. Am I surprised that a developer would want to invest in a council that is as similar as possible to the one he's been dealing with for a few years, because he knows what he's going to get decision-wise and process-wise? I'm not surprised at that either. Most businesses want to do business in a way that has been consistent over time, just for business purposes. But I will speak specifically to the Bridlegate situation development, because I've been working on it for 10 years. From the first day I got on council, it was in the land use committee that I worked on. Mm-hmm. And it's important to know the job of any developer is to get as much as they can from the city. They want as much as they can get by investing as little as they can get, because they're in it to make money. Anybody that thinks differently needs to educate yourself. So it's their job to get as much as they can and make money. Do I believe that there are any developers that genuinely, really, they go to sleep and the last thing on their mind is how Brentwood's doing this week because I built a house or whatever I built there? No, I don't believe that at all. But I do believe that there are developers that have long-standing investments in a community, that how that community overall is perceived by businesses, corporations, and residents, that matters to them business-wise. Mm-hmm. And so the nicer a community and the safer a community, the more they can get for their product. That's how it works. Sure. The job of a city council and the job of a planning commission and a city is to take these ridiculous, and all first applications are ridiculous. That's how that's the design. Let's throw it out there and see what we can get away with.
Right.
And that happens everywhere. It's our job to look at our general plan and the future and say, okay, this is what we want our community to look like. This is the needs that we at this time can anticipate, which will always change as time goes by. And all of these things that this big application, we're going to bring it down to a small size. In that first application, they did not have a school there, and they were not happy when the two of us, Steve Barr, who was a council person at that time, and myself, demanded that, because we've been in conversation constantly with the school district, if there are houses here and this amount, we've got to have another school. And so we fought for 5 years. I fought to get that school and that 11 acres on that piece of property, and to make sure that all of the commercial stayed, because we cannot give up our commercial properties. We can't. That's the sustainability of the future. For a few years, well, for a couple of years, Brentwood was the fastest growing city in the country, in the whole United States. And then several years after that, the fastest growing in the state and in the county. And clearly that's slowed down, and we're coming to our ultimate build out, which is 80,000 people according to the general plan. We don't have very much more room for residential houses. And for a long time, most of the tax increment that we paid for the services in Brentwood was attached to development. Over the years, we've reduced that to somewhere around 20% right now, is all that is going to be sending in tax increment. We've got about 80% of the tax increment based upon the businesses. And so that's why our local businesses are so vitally important, to make sure they're doing okay. Because without our local businesses, the city of Brentwood's going to be in real financial trouble. But talking about these donations, working to make sure that we get what we need to, and the state is not helping our cities locally. Every year they're chipping away at local control. Last year, January, this year, we had implemented the law. It's called Senate Bill 330, SB 330, which absolutely makes it against the law for a city who has a plan, has a general plan that has residential zoning in a certain area. You can't turn that to non-residential. You can't tell them they can't build there, and you can't change that zoning from something to something they can't build on. That's the law. We are handcuffed in a lot of these instances as to what type of thing can happen there. And so it's our job as a city, because building is going to happen in these areas because the governor said this is going to happen. Either the city can control what that looks like, or the state will come in and look at the developer and say, you tell me what you want to do. And the potential there is to get something that we don't want at all, that isn't going to be good for Brentwood, isn't going to be good for our families. And so there's a lot of things that when you look at all of these different components, would I love for Brentwood to have been developed a little bit differently? Of course I would, but I came on board long after most of those decisions were made in the last 10 years. And so all I can do now is do my very best to make sure that any future growth accommodates two specific areas. We've got to have a product, a house that normal, let me rephrase that, normal. What's normal? That the average family can afford to buy in Brentwood. The housing market right now is so expensive. And I don't mean small, tiny houses that are in areas like, I've lived in Washington, D.C. area. I've lived in Baltimore and Annapolis. There are entire areas and regions that were designed that nobody wants to live there and nobody wants to live around there, but the designers and the cities didn't care. We've got to hit these numbers. This is how you do it. You put a bunch of people crammed on top of each other, and that's what you get. I don't want to see that in Brentwood. And we, in the past, have integrated affordable housing with our beautiful neighborhoods. And there's not one person that can even accuse or make the statement that that hasn't worked perfectly. It has worked brilliantly. We have families that can afford these homes or these duplexes or these fourplexes. They love living there. If you're driving through the neighborhood, it looks just like every other home in the neighborhood. And we can force these developers to say, hey, if you want our approval, you want an okay, these are the kind of things that we want integrated into our community, because we want our families. I want my kids to be able to live here and raise their families. One of the most important things to me in a community, and I've lived in some really solid communities, and every single community that I can point at and say, you know what, I want to live in a place like that, they have multi-generational family members in that community. You know, they're living in homes that their grandparents built or bought, or great grandparents. In Brentwood, we have a lot of families that have lived here, some of them for 100 years, some of them for more than that. And we can't afford to price out of our community fiber and fabric our families. We've got to be able to make these developers produce a home that can be sold at a price that's affordable to our families that are first time home buyers and farmers and school teachers and police officers and college students can come back into town and have a place to live and purchase a home. That's the kind of development I want to see integrated with market rate development. The problem is the city doesn't build houses. We don't build homes. We're not builders. So we have to find a way to create a mutually beneficial environment for developers to come in and build what we want while they're still being able to make money. Because if they're not going to make money, they're not going to build. And I know a lot of us have say, you know, I've got family members that say, fine, leave it open, let them not build. But the problem is we don't get that choice anymore. If we put a hurdle that makes them feel like they can't build, they're going to run straight to the state. They're going to use SB 330 as their mechanism, and they're going to force on us what they want. And then we will not be able to have any say or very little say in what happens. And
Okay.
so I know that's a really long answer, but
No. There's actually an awful lot to unpack, but this lesson you've given me, and hopefully the 3 or 4 people watching this too, has been illuminating. Particularly, well, 2 things. The SB rule. Really, until you said it, and this is why I'm doing this thing, is because I know I'm woefully ignorant. I didn't know about that. It does raise the question, though, if we have a limit of 80,000 homes, well, what happens when you hit 80,000? You know, does it become 100,000 all of a sudden? And actually, this is going to roll into the plan, the general plan. But one other thing you had mentioned about it being counterintuitive, I can't agree or disagree because I've never run for anything. But technically, if I just did a cursory look, but it seems like those that have the most amount of money in their war chest are incumbents. And technically, even though you're running for a new office, one could argue you are an incumbent. You have a record. You may not have a record as mayor, but you do have a record as vice mayor and as council. So that's why the counterintuitive part I'm still trying to reconcile because of the appearance. Quick example. I used to coach my kids, basketball and soccer. You always had the coach's kid challenge. Is this kid getting more playtime because he's your child? Or Johnny's not getting enough playtime because Kai is playing way too much, or Christopher's playing way too much. So you always have to worry about the appearance. And I guess that's what, you know, the whole point of that particular question was the appearance of it. And it seems like, yeah, I could see it being counterintuitive. However, it's, conversely, it seems like those that have the most money are those that are already known or sitting in the seat. I mean, you can comment on it if you wish, or we can move on. That was just, 2 points
I
out
don't
of
disagree
that.
at all.
I'm sorry.
I don't disagree at all with what you just said. It does seem that way. And sometimes it seems that way because it is that way. That's one of the things I've learned is a lot of times when something seems that way, it's because it is that way. But
Occam's razor. Google
that's
it, kids.
exactly right. One of the reasons though that is that people like a known entity.
Mhm.
Um, there are places that I'll go eat at a restaurant, not because it's the best restaurant I've ever eaten of that type, but because every time I go there, there's consistency there. And I'm not going to worry about having a great meal one day and the next time not having a good meal. And universally, in business, people do that as well. Um, they want to do business with a known entity. They want to know that this council person thinks along these lines and behaves and votes this way. This council person behaves and votes this way. Whether they agree with that process or that decision or not, they know because of the track record. This, you look at their track record, this person, these are the things that are at the top of their want list. If you're going to bring a project or bring a business, these are the things that they're going to ask you about.
Right,
So going in, you're going to need to answer those to the satisfaction of that individual.
right,
And a lot of the benefit of having been the incumbent is that I've got a lot, and anyone who's been an incumbent has a track record. Whereas no matter how excellent the credentials of a person running for a position is, you really don't know unless you've done business for years with them outside of that arena. You really don't know what is rhetoric and what is real.
right.
You don't know. And there are a lot of people, we all know this, and a lot of people will say a lot of things during running for a position or a seat or a board. And when they get in there, they will find two real situations. One is the amazing amount that I didn't know about what the regulations were and what you could and couldn't do. I was very frustrated for the first couple of years being on council because there were a lot of things that I personally felt very strongly about, that there were laws that prevented that from happening. I could not get that done. Although I had said, this is what I want to do, I was not aware that there were laws and regulations that prohibited that. And so the learning curve is significant. And so anytime anybody's running for something and they've never done that job before, and they say a lot of pretty extravagant things, it's don't go too hard on them if within the first couple years, they can't do to the degree they promised, because there's a lot of things that the state and the federal government do to eliminate and then to influence and eliminate what local cities can do.
Right. Fair enough. And actually, you probably noticed I was typing. Uh, Again, I'm not in disagreement. And actually, this is going to roll into the analogy I've been using. But when you had mentioned, they want to know a person that's been in there and has the track record, are we talking they, the developers, or they, us? And this rolls now into the analogy. And I'll ask the question first. Can the city or city leaders initiate an emergency proclamation or whatever adjective and noun are the two words that basically not halt. I had to be clear on that now, not halt, but stop developers, new, old, until they all come to the table and work out these money matters. The analogy I use for those who've not heard this before, Brentwood is our house. You live in our house, I live in our house. Our house has two types of kids that come in here. The kids who live here, which are the civic leaders, the office that you will attain, and then the neighbor kids, the developers. And for years, and this is not unique to Brentwood, but I'm selfish and only talking about Brentwood. But for years, we've had kids dirtying up the house. And we keep saying, Susie, Johnny, you can't play with these toys, the money, until you clean the house. And Susie and Johnny give us all kinds of excuses. Well, I don't live here. Oh, well, is it that bad? Or how come I got to do it and Johnny doesn't? All those excuses. And then I had to amend this analogy. You have a neighbor kid who's been sleeping on the couch for 15 years. And he's been saying, well, why do I need to clean a house? I've been here for 15 years. Your kids don't even clean the house. So that analogy, okay, nobody can play with any toys until you clean the house. And I know new kids coming in, they already know the rules. They bring their mops and their brooms and they go, okay, Mr. Dorman, okay, Mr. Bryant, what do you want me to clean first? Those new kids, they do know. But it's the old kids and it's the kids, our kids, the elected leaders, who just don't seem to get it. And that's why I use it simplistically. You're a father, you have a home, you have kids. Would you keep tolerating the kids not doing their chores? And if the neighbor kids come in and they say, well, this isn't my house, it's like, yeah, but you're playing with our toys. If you don't like our toys, go over to Oakley's house. Yeah, I doubt if they're going to go because we have all the cool toys. But that's my point is, can we do some type of executive action like the mask rule? And this came down from the state, but not from the city. But you can't go into a 7-Eleven without a mask. You can't go into Target. You can't go into Safeway. No one likes it, but everyone adheres to it because they have no other choice. Why can't we do something like that to get the kids to clean the house?
Well, we can do some things, but specifically when we're talking about residential development, SB 330 is why we can't stop it. We can tell them, if you're going to build here, you're going to take care of every single impact that you have, period. And if you don't even talk to us. This is a universal from the city, from the council, from planning commission, and from our residents. You're going to take care of. You're not going to come sleep on our couch. You're going to come sleep on our couch and you're going to clean and you're going to bring your own food and you're going to clean up and you're going to do the dishes too. You're going to take care of not just your impact, but you're also, the city's always wanting to get even a little more than that. You're going to help take care of future impacts by infrastructure and different things like that. So can we say, no, you can't build here? We can. And the state has let us know in January with SB 330, if you say that and it was already zoned for building, we're going to come in and whatever's on the table, we're going to throw out and we're going to let them do whatever this says they can do. So I completely understand what you're saying, and it's a very good analogy. The problem is, as a city, we legally cannot tell them, no, you cannot build here if it's zoned to build there. We can't do it anymore, according to January SB 330.
Okay.
And so that is extremely frustrating. I have been working now for 10 years with the fire district and fire protection district. For half of that time, I was constantly making press releases and talking to the community about the absolute essentiality of fixing the fire district. And it's important, very important for me, for folks to understand how we got here, what happened, how could this possibly have happened this way. That's the question I had when I got first actually thrown on the fire board. I didn't have any history. I didn't know. I just knew now we've just got a handful of fire stations. That's not enough. What's going on? Well, I found out that the process of funding those happened with Prop, um, oh goodness, that sorry, that number just Prop 13.
No,
Anyway,
the 78 one.
1978 one. There's no mechanism at that time put in there for growth. At this time, at that time, Brentwood area, our fire district, which is Brentwood, Oakley, Bethel Island, Discovery Bay, Byron, and Knightson, 249 square miles.
Right.
At that time, there was less than 100,000 people that lived in all of that area and part of Antioch. It was predominantly agricultural at the time. And so the amount of the pennies on the dollar that would take care of there, we had volunteer firefighters. We had a mix of several different fire groups out here. And so that was the amount they gave them in 1978. It isn't that percentage that we get now. It's exactly that dollar amount that we get now.
Right.
That's important to understand, because if it were just the percentage, then that would have gone up, but that's not the case. And so as time went by, and in 2010 was the formation of the East Contra Costa Fire Protection District. That was a patchwork group of several different fire protection units that were out here. Each one of those units had their own bookkeeping system, and some of them were volunteers, some of them weren't. Some people are better at math and organization. And so in 2010, when I got on the fire board, we very literally, and excuse me, my dogs are excited about someone.
All right. Oh, well, thank you, dogs. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but no, hey, calm
Oh,
down.
I think they changed from excitement though. What is he doing here?
I think the yard guys or the neighbors are out there, but
No problem.
so anyway, what happened was we very much had boxes that we had to go paper by paper through with staff, and we had very limited staff. The county at that time was managing the finances and had been doing so for so long. And I'm not pointing fingers at the county. Everybody knows things change around and different people are required to do different things. But when we finally got to the point where we knew what condition was and the finances and everything were, it was there were parts of the county that were unaware they were supposed to be reporting to other parts of the county, and they found $6.2 million that had been held by the county that belonged into the account of the East Contra Costa Fire Protection District.
Mhm.
The day we found that out, we made that public, because not only did we not have any way on our side to know that that was there because of the mess we inherited, when we finally got everything ironed out, then we started figuring out what we had and what we didn't have financially. And from that point on, it's taken us 10 years to get to where we are now. And over that time period, we haven't been able to have any interest. During that time, about 3 or 4 years ago, the fire board that was not an elected, it was an appointed fire board at that time, sent out a letter to all responsive agencies in this area, whether or not they would like to partner with East Contra Costa, whether they would like to consolidate East Contra Costa. And we got no interest at all. As a matter of fact, the letters that we got back weren't just no, they were no way in the world.
Yeah.
And because we could not finance the amount of coverage that we needed ourselves, anybody that took us on wasn't going, we were going to be a negative on their bottom line. Finally, now with the changes that have happened, and with what's going on with the amount that Contra Costa Fire, because of their size, they have the benefit of being able to provide services at a lower cost because of the volume of services they have and the volume of resources. And because of the financial benefits and changes, over the last 10 years, we were able to get East Contra Costa firefighters to pay 100% of their retirement. So we began to chip away at all these different areas that were a hole financially. So now we're finally at a place where we can have legitimate talks with Contra Costa Fire Protection District and East Contra Costa Fire Protection District about consolidation. And Contra Costa Fire Chief Richard is doing a feasibility study right now. I'm working from the city side of things with our fire chief and our fire board, and we're pushing toward that. I am completely in support of, and will do anything I can possibly do to make it happen, to have that consolidation happen. Because what that means is immediately our firefighters are paid equally to what Contra Costa Fire Protection District is.
Right.
We get advanced life support. So what that means is right now we have basic life support. Advanced, that means our guys can clear air passages, can implement an EpiPen or Narcan if somebody's overdosed. They might be able to give oxygen and certain things, but they can't push drugs to keep somebody alive. Advanced life support, you can medically keep them alive with drugs that you can administer. That's what a paramedic does.
Right.
We currently have paramedic trained firefighters that can't do the job of a paramedic because East Contra Costa does not have the ability to do that. We're basic life support. So they're not insured to do it and they're not paid to do it. So as a resident and as a former fire board member, the level of frustration that brought me, but imagine the firefighter that's trained can go in and be a paramedic, but because we can't legally operate that way as a district, they have to stand there and wait for the paramedics to show up. That level of frustration goes away with advanced life support.
Right.
That will happen immediately during consolidation. Plus, we get many more bodies that come into the rotation of filling these firehouses, not just the handful that have been diligently working and sacrificing for so long, and they're worn out, they're injured, but because there's only a handful of them, they have to keep that short rotation. That's another issue that we face every day as residents here and as a fire district. So the consolidation would potentially immediately give us 2 brand new firehouses with a ladder truck, with helicopters, with the fireboat in the areas that need access from the water, immediately without raising any taxes, without changing anything else. That would be a part of what we had immediately. And then we would address the need as the finances from the state could come through, and everything would change and be 100% improved immediately, especially if we got the third fire station. But we would very likely have 2 fire stations immediately and all these new bodies. So that's part of why we are where we are right now and what we're pushing to get to. I don't know. I'm sorry for the distraction.
No. That's okay. At least you don't have a fly on your head. So, yeah. Not saying it for one party or the other.
I totally get it.
Yeah, just an observation because I do watch things. But no, you did. And I would love, honestly, I don't know if Zoom's actually going to cut us off at some point because I do the free version. But I heard of consolidation for the first time yesterday when I spoke to Mr. Kellogg. And that is an interesting method, for lack of a better term, of going forward in a positive way. Love to speak more about that or hear more about it. Maybe not right now, but uh, I wish I knew that question a month ago about consolidation. But that was more again, I'd love to hear that from you, and maybe we can circle back. But if I don't get these two last questions in, I'll be mad at myself. Um, let's start with this one. I didn't know that the vice mayor was appointed. I found that out recently. So when you win, because again, I got to be right with one of you. Would you consider, oh no, let me rephrase. When you win, I'm sure you have somebody in mind. I'm sure you're not just going to pick a name out of a hat. But would you consider taking the next runner up as your vice mayor?
You know, it depends on who's sitting there. We have a potential of having three brand new council persons there. Um, and we will have two council persons elected that will be new. So depending on what happens, um, the the position of vice mayor really, you're a council person, but oftentimes you will get called to sit in when the mayor's not available, and you're putting someone in a position to fail, putting them in a situation if they haven't had time to learn the background on decisions that have been made, to learn how the process is happens. Um, I never want anybody to sit in a position where they feel that they were set up to fail. And it's not good for the city. It's not good for our families and residents. So I don't know. Having been put in that position, I wasn't selected to be vice mayor until I had been on council for 2 years the first time.
Okay.
And I considered that an advantage. Uh, Steve Barr, who was put in as vice mayor, he and I got elected at the same time, but he had significantly more experience on school boards than I had in other areas. And I was quite relieved when that was how the process worked,
Mhm.
because you could not have been more green than I was when I first got elected. I hadn't sat on any boards or commissions locally. And so, um, on one hand, certainly I would consider it, but knowing what's involved and the time that's involved in it, uh, I would want to talk to that person to see if they felt that they were ready for that position as well. And if they said yes, then that would be a different conversation altogether.
But couldn't the argument be made though, if they're running for mayor, in their mind at least they think they're ready. Otherwise, why are they running? And if it's the second, the person that comes in second place, well, let me rephrase. If there are one, two, three, I think four people who have never held any type of office, I'll go with three. I know three for sure. So if they were to become mayor, they would be in the exact same position you're referring to as vice mayor. If one could argue that they're being set up to fail. So I understand that argument. However, the argument is based on the predicate that the mayor has some history with Brentwood. So for mayor specifically, there's two of you. Okay. You've both been on council. You both have been, in the system for quite some time. But if someone other than the two of you were to win, well, they're coming in brand spanking new, and they have to rely on potentially a new city council also. So I guess what I'm saying is, I understand what you just said makes complete sense. You don't want someone in the second chair and you've been that guy who was in the second chair, but you weren't green. So the presumption is that the Mr. and Miss Congeniality would be new. Okay. And again, like I said, I know you must have somebody in mind. Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty silly. You're not, then the presumption is you're not planning on winning. So whoever you have in mind, and I'm not asking you who you have in mind, but I would hope, I guess, that whomever it is, isn't set up to fail.
Well, that's in my experience and opinion, and I don't think anybody that's ever been in a leadership position would disagree. Uh, your job as a leader is to develop people to take your job and to be better at it.
Right.
That's your job. And so, I always want someone that steps in a position that I may have been in to be better at it than I was, and they'll have my support. I am running from what's called a safe seat. If I don't become elected as mayor, I still will be on city council as a council person for 2 more years.
Mhm.
I will not be the vice mayor during that time period. It's a 2-year position, and I fully expect there to be another vice mayor there. I would hope it was somebody that has some experience for the reasons I just said. But as a council person, anything I can do to help someone be successful only helps all of us, because every council person, I know we're running in districts now, but Brentwood's too small for that kind of district mindset. Every decision that happens in Brentwood affects all of us to some degree. Of course, some of us more than others, depending on what happens where. But no, so I absolutely, if I do not become the mayor, I will not be the vice mayor,
Right.
but whoever is will have all my support. Whoever is, if and believe me, there's certainly no presumption right now that that would be the case. But should I be elected mayor, um, I will want someone uh, to be successful in whatever position they have. I don't know if I answered the
No,
question.
no, no, you did. You did. I believe you did. If I heard, and I understand all your points, but if I heard, you would consider it, depending on the circumstance.
I would certainly ask the person. You
Okay.
know, I
That's fair enough. Like I said, I'm learning more and more about how we run as a city. And so this now circles back to all of you and taking the time to speak with, I'm just your neighbor at the end of the day. Um, one, well, I have two questions. Let me go with the one I should have asked in the beginning, which is, for you in your time as a public servant here, what is the top accomplishment you have that you love to brag about? And I say bragging in a great way. And what, if you had a chance to do over something, what would that do over be?
I think the single top accomplishment that I've been involved with is bringing our own police dispatch and 911 call center here. And the reason I'm saying that is, for the many years that we were partnered and with the city of Antioch, uh, that that relationship had devolved at no fault of the police dispatchers over there. Uh, the financial situation of the city of Antioch had changed significantly. Their ability to throw bodies and resources into the seats at dispatch had been severely challenged. But we were in a position where, for at least 3 years, our residents were calling 911, and it was the norm for them to either be put on hold for significant amount of time or to get no answer whatsoever. and that happened to me twice. I was put on hold for 6 minutes one time during a 911 call that I was on a scene trying to assist somebody that had been injured. And I called 911 another time and was put on hold, and nobody ever came back. So I began to have regular phone calls almost on a weekly basis of people that had had similar experiences, some of them with much worse results than what I had experienced. And so our police officers were pulling over vehicles, and they would call in to get information. And sometimes it would be a minute or two before that information could come back. That's very dangerous for a police officer to be in a situation, not know who's got pulled over, not know what the danger potential is. Or they would be on scene on a domestic or on a call, and they couldn't get information from dispatch simply because they were overwhelmed. And so it was expedient to have our own police dispatch. And because we do, now not only do we have one of the most technologically advanced and up-to-date uh, dispatch centers in the country, but every single time anybody in Brentwood calls 911, they get an immediate response. There's somebody there right now. And that has saved lives in our community. There are people that I know and talk to me occasionally that because of that, they're alive today, or their children are alive today because we brought that 911 call center here. And that to me makes all the difference. Y- I'll just have to have people take this for face value. I know you don't know me as a person, but there is absolutely nothing more important to me than a person. All of us are just people. All of us are just families. And when something's going wrong and something's happening to your family, it doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree, or we're Giants fans or A's. None of that matters. When there's a person that needs help, we need to be there and be able to help them as much as possible, as soon as possible. And so that's what matters the most to me. And
Okay.
so that would be the best thing, I think. The worst thing that I if I could go back, and there's not a day that I don't wish I had a better crystal ball. I don't know of any council persons that don't do our best to really be informed on our decision making process, not only what's going on now, but historically what happened to get us here, and in the future what's going to happen. And in the process of that, there are some zonings uh, in the general plan that, knowing what I know now and seeing the changes in the state that have happened now, I would have zoned some areas in the process of working in the general plan. I would have zoned those differently to be more advantageous to businesses versus residential housing. Those are the two main things.
Fair enough. Last question. Uh, and I know this is going to upset some people, some of our neighbors, but this is the stark reality of it. Brentwood historically, it has not been friendly when it comes to MBEs, WBEs, minority-owned business, woman-owned businesses, nor have they been really fair when it comes to having something for our youngsters. And I mean, 21 to 26, not old guys like us. Other than Delta Bowl, there have been places, what I don't even know if it's still Johnny Garlic's, but whatever that establishment was, had some nightlife going on that, for good or for ill, seemed to, was doomed to fail. There are some places around here, but it's catered more towards the old Brentwood. And so, but there really isn't anything. And so when you become mayor, what well, two-part question. One, is there anything you can do to help that type of innovation? And I guess question two would be, if you can, then what would you do? Oh, and before you answer the question, I'm sorry. The reason I did the initial preference is I know that race is an issue. Okay. It's just that that's the other big elephant in the room. All right. And I'm not trying to say anything one way or another other than to acknowledge the fact that it is here, a disparity. So that's why when I asked the question, I framed it for woman-owned, minority-owned businesses, but it's still the same, what business I'm referring to, and that is something that's geared towards the youth, young adults, not youth. I'm talking about 21 and over.
Well, I agree completely with you. And I do so not just from observance, but because my kids are in that age group. And there's not a week that goes by that they don't reinforce the premise that you put forward. And I agree with that. I will tell you, the only way that I've ever learned to get people what they want is let the ones that are most affected tell you what they want. I don't know what people the age of my kids are, or 21. I know what I wanted when I was their age. It's not the same thing as what they want. I don't even know what the trends. I can't keep up with the trends on social media, but what I can do is I can sit down with them and ask them what are the things, the ideas that they have. And anybody that has never sat down with a young person and asked them what they think, they have no idea how brilliant they are. Our kids, our young people are so far advanced in 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 the ways of how things work comparatively to what I was when I was their age. There were certain things I was really interested in when I was a 20-year-old guy that had nothing to do with future technologies or businesses. It had to do with, music, or girls, or whatever. But our young people, I'm telling you, I learn more from them than they do from me every time I sit down with them. So if I were mayor, I would get a group of them that have the ideas and marry them up in meetings and time together with people that have the resources, that are already doing some of the things. One of the great things is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can get people with ideas and let them meet the people that are doing something very similar or the exact same thing. Find out a way to bring that here.
Right.
And yeah, we have the PA1 specific plan of the innovation center, but there are areas that are zoned specifically for that. As far as having minority owned businesses, um, I know that I have. So my wife is Osage Indian. Um, so
Not trying to paint you in the corner.
no, I don't. I understand clearly there's a disparity. I think that some of that disparity just happens to be with what the demographics were here for so long. But at the same time, I would never tolerate the first hint of, if it's ever brought to my attention, and certainly training. We are blessed as a city to have several new directors and employees that are people of color who have experience that we've never had access to,
Right.
on our staff before, since I've been on council. They're brilliant, and they are far down the path from me in how to attract the minority owned businesses. I think some of it simply is that there are certain businesses that we haven't had the demographics for, we haven't had the call for in the community until the last year or so, couple years. And the East Contra Costa region just hasn't had the access until we had the new highway 4 bypass. We were the end of the road. We were the cul-de-sac. We didn't have a lot of that interest, but now that we have what we have, we can certainly do better at focusing on that. Because if we don't catch up to what is attractive to not only our families, but the businesses that we're wanting to attract, then we're going to always be second, third, or fourth on the list of places they want to do business. And we have to be at the top of that list if we're going to make any significant long-term changes.
And I agree wholeheartedly. And when I say youth, I'm not necessarily targeting the 21 and up. I have two sons. One's 30, he lives in LA, the other's 34. He just moved out here. The primary reason he moved out here with his wife is because I'm built-in nanny now. So he used to live in Oakland. He is literally a recent transplant. He's only been here a couple of months. But one of the reasons he was hesitant on moving out here was because there was no social scene. And when we moved out here, he was 14 at the time. And so, or no, he was 16. But my point is, he was a young adult. Until he moved out of here in 2011, he pretty much grew up here as a young adult with nothing to do. And so this was actually a question my wife wanted me to ask about that, because he is an actual stakeholder in a supper club in Oakland. And, now with COVID, everything has changed, but eventually we will get to a point where the old, not old, but the shortcomings of some place for these young adults, and I'll say 40 and younger because they're all kids to me, really have nowhere to go other than the sports bar, and please, whoever owns this business where the Elvis impersonator is, and like I said, what used to be Johnny Garlic's, and that's not even there anymore. So it's really limited. And so that's why I was asking specifically about minority-owned businesses, because yes, there is that disparity. But again, the goal of more, and you're an artist, wouldn't you love to have a place where you could play every Saturday night?
I would love that. Absolutely. And I have to go into Berkeley or San Francisco or that area a lot of times, as a jazz musician, and I know that that's a matter of taste and a lot of people aren't into that, but Berkeley is an outstanding area. We fortunately are near, but why not have that here as well? There's so much that we have the potential to do. And most of the time when something isn't accomplished, I've noticed that it's because there are a lot of people that want it, but nobody has a mechanism to get together and push it over the curb, make sure that happens.
Right.
And as a city, we have done poorly at that. And we have to do better at working, not just with the Chamber of Commerce, who years ago when we first moved here, I was a part of the chamber. It is not the same chamber as it was then. They have done such outstanding work to move forward. And so partner with the Chamber of Commerce, partner with different service groups, partner with different local interest groups, and we can certainly get some things like that done. We have the park downtown. There's no reason why we can't turn that into something similar to a Central Park in New York. A lot of people may not have had the advantage of being there, or some areas in Chicago, but as a musician or an artist, or a place to take your family that they can physically be involved, in different productions, different things, we have the ability to do it by having space. We need to be doing more than we're doing. Absolutely.
All right. No, and we had something last year. A friend of mine, she was the MC for it, Leslie Stovall. My wife and I and our cousins, we went, we enjoyed ourselves. So no, you're definitely preaching to the choir here. Um, on that note, oh, that's what I was going to say. Win or lose, you'll still be on the council. So, or you'll still be an integral part. So hopefully, regardless of where you end on November 4th, you'll help go along those lines of creating something for the, and I say new Brentwood, I'm still considered new Brentwood. I've been here 17 years. So for the new Brentwood, hopefully you'll help us take an active role. How about that?
Absolutely. And even when the time comes that I'm not on council, I still very much plan on doing exactly that. I, we live here. This is our home. You know, we're surrounded by our neighbors, our friends, and this matters to me. And I want to continually make it better. You know, no individual one of us could do it all by ourselves, but we can all do it together. We absolutely can do that.
Absolutely agree wholeheartedly. And I got you on tape. So
Yes, you do.
anyway, uh, Vice Mayor, I'm old military,
Please
so
call me Joe.
I like to go by your title. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor, really, really, really. I hope, and I'll end it. If you have any other parting words before I hit the stop button on record, but I thank you, and I'm sure the 3 or 4 people who watch this will thank you as well.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I would love to get together offline and even learn more about what your vision is, what things that you would like to. Uh, you know, again, we're a fairly small community, but we can do some pretty great things together as long as there's that communication.
No, and I agree, and I'm so sorry. I think that was my 5-minute warning. No, joking. But no, Vice Mayor, certainly. As soon as I hit the pause button, I can talk as long as you're willing to listen to me. But thank you, sir. I'm getting ready to hit the pause button right